What is up, guys? It's Dan the Man, and today I'm back with the last round of Chess Zone's June Classic Tournament. And going into the last round, which is round 5, I have a score of 2 out of 4. We got a very stockfish level game in the 4th round against Joshua. We basically just traded a bunch of pieces. It was a totally stagnant endgame, nothing too exciting in that one. Perfect game based on the accuracy, so... yeah, we get 2 draws, and last round I'm paired against Dylan Pfeifer, who I think I've played one other time on the channel, and I believe we drew that game. But that was a long time ago, and I kind of didn't know his playing style or what he likes to do as white or black. But I did notice that in round 1, he defeated a 2100 out of the opening. He defeated like a really good player. And I happened to see the position and was like, oh, dang, like, Dylan's crushing. So, and he also beat Vishruth Yelisetti, who's like a 2,000-plus player also. So, I knew this guy had some upsets, and his rating is not reflect accurate of how he plays, and actually earns quite a bit of rating from this tournament. So, I knew he was quite a tricky player, and that was what I had going into it. So let's just go ahead and see how I fare up against that. So I have the white pieces, and begin the game with e4. And here, Dylan plays the Alekhines defense, something I don't really see too often over the board. It's a move, but, you know, you're allowing the pawn to go forward and kick the knight away already. So e5, the most natural move in my opinion. Knight d5, d4, just gaining space in the center. And here, black has to go d6 to try to trade off my advanced center pawns. Otherwise, I'm going to play like c4 next turn and just kick the knight around some more. So d6 is pretty much essential in this type of setup. And that's what Dylan does. He probably is well versed on the Alekhine theory. So I go with knight f3, just defending and developing my piece. He goes with g6, trying to fianchetto. I mean, I didn't know this was all theory. It just looked normal, but... I think he knows this opening better than I do, so I sort of just went along with it. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. c4, knight b6, knight c3. The engine preferred to trade the pawns, but this move isn't really that much of a difference either. So here we went bishop g7. Again, the engine's saying I should take on d6, but my move is perfectly fine in and of itself. It's only went down like 0.2 from the top move. So we get bishop e3, Dylan castles, and I go with bishop e2, just going for a sort of a slow move. I was also thinking about playing c5 here, trying to attack the knight again and force the d file open if he were to take, just advancing in the center basically. But I kind of didn't want that because after this, I was looking at it before playing bishop e2. After d takes c5, d takes c5. He would play knight 6 to d7, and he was already attacking my pawn on e5 twice, and I didn't feel like defending it, like with bishop f4. That's not what the engine wants. Bishop d4 also looks weird because it allows knight c6. So I didn't want to lose a pawn here, but the engine's saying to do the sacrifice. It's kind of common. You sack your e-pawn in hopes of black doubling their pawns, in which case you just create a long-term weakness. So e6 is what I should have done if I were to go down this rabbit hole. So after f takes e6, white can already start piling pressure on the pawn and quickly win it back with a lot of interest. It's because, you know, I'm going to take on e6, and black's king's going to be a little bit weak, so... This is what I should have done. I should have not been worried about losing the pawn. I should have just sacrificed it on e6 if I had played c5, but I play sort of a more reserved move. I play bishop e2, which is still totally fine, except it's not the best move. So here, Dylan plays bishop g4, and here I actually am baiting him to play h3. The engine doesn't like that. It says I should have played c5, but I was trying to bait Dylan to take so I could get my bishop on the active diagonal, which actually turns out to be the best move, because Dylan takes here, I take, and I was already threatening to take on b7. Now, what's funny here is that totally missed that Dylan could have played d takes e5. I thought he couldn't do that. I thought he'd have to defend on b7 first. But he actually can do this. If he were to take my pawn and I take on b7, he would fork my bishop and knight with e takes d4, and it would be leading to two minor pieces for him and only a rook for me. So I would have to take back, actually. But instead of playing d takes e5, Dylan played knight c6, but that's also pretty logical. Just developing, adding 3 attackers on e5. Also, the knight on b6 is looking at c4, so I'm like, wait, maybe my position's sort of falling apart kind of early. So this is why the engine's saying I should take the knight on c6, but, you know, I kind of didn't want to give away my bishop for the knight, especially considering my whole point was to activate it on that diagonal. But it's just to help neutralize black's pressure on the center, so I guess in this case I should have traded the bishop for the knight. But I play e takes d6. Then the engine frowns on this move. It says, I mean, I'm not like losing, but black's already having the upper hand here. Yeah, because of knight takes c4, which is what he does. I play d takes c7, sort of an in-between move. Queen takes c7. And here, I noticed my pawn on d4 is kind of weak. Rook's going to come over to d8 at some point. Knight takes b2 is a threat in some lines. So yeah, I kind of was like, I don't really like my position too much. But after some time, I'm like, wait, if he takes on b2, maybe I can trap his knight. So I'm sort of giving the pawn to him, but on my terms. So I play castles. And actually, the funny thing is that he actually can get away with this. I thought he couldn't play knight takes b2 because after queen e2, it looks like the knight's just trapped, right? It can't get out. But the engine finds a nice defense. It says knight takes d4, and I have to take that knight. It's pretty strong. Bishop takes d4, bishop takes d4, so he's hitting my knight on c3 twice. And if I try to go like knight b5 to get a fork on the queen and bishop, then the engine's like, okay, just defend your bishop. We get a couple of trades. Queen takes c7, and this position's about equal. Black's temporarily up a pawn, but b7's weak, and the knight's kind of stranded, so I do have some compensation for that, and the engine judges this as basically zeros. So Dylan could have taken on b2 if he wanted to, but here he played the move rook a to d8, which is a much better move, just adding another attacker on d4. And here we each had an hour and 25 minutes, so considering this is a 90-minute game, we didn't really spend too much time here. So here, I decided to play bishop c6. I thought now was the right time to trade it off, but again, I'm misplaying this in the Alekhines defense. Black already has a -1 advantage, which is kind of odd considering usually in Alekhines defense, white is trying to get the upper hand and not black. So I kind of didn't know my opening theory here. So here, bishop takes c6. I was just expecting maybe black to capture with the queen, but Dylan plays knight takes e3. Turns out to be the best move, and I was actually happy he did this because I get rid of that knight. I have 2 center pawns, and I was happy here. So after f takes e3, Dylan played queen takes c6. I don't agree with Stockfish. I don't get how b takes is better, just splitting the pawns and blocking the c file, but I don't know, Stockfish is Stockfish. So queen takes c6 is on the board, and here I noticed that e5 is a really good move for black. That would just be I would be in a lot of trouble because he'd be attacking d4 another time, and that bishop would just come to life on g7, so I have to get my queen off that file ASAP. So I choose to do that with queen f3, sort of offering to go into an endgame. And he thinks for a little bit, considers his options, but eventually decides to trade. And here I was thinking about whether to take with the rook or the pawn. Turns out the pawn's better, just to have like 3 pawns next to each other. But I would then isolate my h-pawn, so I don't know. But I played rook takes f3. Both captures are pretty much interchangeable, but Stockfish slightly prefers g takes, but not the end of the world with rook takes either. So rook takes f3, again, Dylan's thematic idea of e5 is here. If I take, that would not only double not double. Not only isolate my e pawn, but also that will just totally activate black's bishop, which is something I don't want. So here I decided to play d5 to now I have a passer, and next move I'm gonna play like e4 here to just reinforce it, and I thought this would be a long-term advantage for me, a good asset. Now here I was actually thinking Dylan would play e4 himself, which is a very interesting move here. And maybe actually, yeah, it's the best move. I thought he would go into this because he's attacking the rook, and he's also attacking the knight, which is defending the pawn. So I'd have to deal with that. I'd have to play knight takes e4, rook takes d5, and then again I'm like, black's kind of better here actually because I have the isolated pawn on e3, and black's bishop is just super annoying. And if I actually the only move to be equal and not black just being totally better here is knight f6, just trading the pieces off. And this rook endgame is about equal, but I would much prefer black here because black has just has a healthier pawn structure, can long term attack e3, and I would be the one trying to draw here. So that's what Dylan probably should have done. That was frankly what I was expecting to see, e4, but he played f5, which is also a fine move. He's trying to create a pawn chain with e4 next. And here, Stockfish is saying I should be the one to play e4 here. Because, actually, e4 here, sorry. e4 here, I'm like, well, he's going to take, and I have to, trade rooks and be down a pawn. But, yeah, again, f takes e4, rook e3. I just attack the pawn like that. So I guess I have to work on, not being afraid of temporarily being down material, because either you're going to win it back soon after, or you're just going to have an advantage that outweighs being down a pawn. So I don't know, I guess I sort of get freaked, like, I'm down a pawn, I have to take back, stuff like that. Like, shouldn't be worried too much about losing a pawn if I can find a way to get the material back quickly or convert it in some other way. So I should have went this route, but I was worried about my pawn being lost, so I played rook d1, because if he trades my knight for the bishop, at least my rook's defending d5, right? So that was my thought process. That's pretty much what happened. So he plays e4, and again, he's hitting the rook. I play rook f2, and the reason I played rook d1 is because my pawn's defended with on d5, so that's why I went there. So after rook f2, he played rook d7, probably intending to double on the d file to attack my pawn again. Here we each had about hour and 10 minutes here, a little more actually. So after rook d7, I'm trying to think about what to do. Maybe play rook f to d2 to try to double on my pawn. Maybe bring the king into the game with king f1. But here I find the best move, and I'm happy I found this. I play g4, just trying to shatter his pawn chain, and if he takes, that would be really good for me because his e-pawn would become isolated, and the connectivity of the pawns would be shattered, and that would diminish black's advantage. So that was what I was going for. Here, the best move for Dylan would have been bishop h6 to attack my pawn on e3, and then when it would force me to be a bit passive, I'd go like rook e2. Not ideal, but it's still about equal if he did that. And what he instead did was kind of surprising. He gave up his bishop for the knight. B takes c3, takes back, and now I was happy because maybe I'd go c4 at some point to defend my pawn if he were to attack it again. So after here, he played f takes g4, and this is getting pretty drawn very quickly because, there's going to be a lot of trades probably. Rooks might come off soon. But I think, I could take his rook on f8, but then his king would take. So let me just take back and have him take me so I could get my king forward. So we were sort of keeping the tension. Here Dylan did not trade because he didn't want to help my king get out. So he played rook c8, just attacking the pawn on c3. I go rook d4 to counterattack his pawn on e4. We get rook takes c3, rook takes c4. And here, Dylan actually can take on d5, but I suppose he was scared about rook e8 check, followed by rook e7, which would fork the king and the b pawn. So I suppose he was worried about that. which is why he played the move rook d3 to probably intend to take the pawn like this with the rook on d3, so as the 7th rank is defended. But I saw that was a bit inaccurate because I can play rook e8 check, king goes to g7, and then I can just play e4, and well, his plan's kind of foiled now. Like, my pawns are really healthy on the center files, and they're passed, so like black has to worry about stopping them. So, and the engine already favors me in this position. It says I'm plus 0.8. So yeah, Dylan kind of made an inaccuracy here, but it's still about equal, and I can't exactly push my center pawns that easily. So it's just a long-term asset here. So after e4, he played rook g3 check. I block and defend my g-pawn. And I would be happy with the rook trade because the center pawns would overwhelm black's pieces. So he correctly doesn't trade. He could play his rook f3. Here I play g5, just sort of constricting black's king side. If h6 or h5, I would en passant or take and weaken the pawn on g6 a bit. So I'm sort of freezing the king's mobility and the h-pawn mobility like that. Also sort of waiting around, seeing what he'll do. So here he played king f7, which the engine doesn't like. It says I'm plus 1.6. Here I play rook e6. He goes rook c7, probably trying to come down to c1 and bother my king a bit. And here, one of the first moves I was considering, which turns out to be the best move, and probably what I'd play in like a fast game, is rook f2. But I don't know. For some reason I didn't do it here, because rook f2 again, the rook trade helps me because white's pawns on the center files are really powerful. So powerful, in fact, that you can be down 2 pawns and still be winning. So I'm going to show you how. I didn't go into this line because I was worried about being down a pawn, which I should work on that. Like, even though you're down a material, if you have like something to compensate for that, it's more than enough to be down a pawn for. But I'm scared about being down materials, so I didn't go down this route. So rook takes f2. This is the line that I should have went into. King takes. Rook c2. This is what I was afraid of. Rook takes a2, and I'm like, maybe black's pawns can queen. I don't know. Can't really push my pawns. Maybe this is winning for black. Or not winning, like better for black at least. Because maybe black can push their pawns faster than I can push mine. I don't know. I was sort of getting a bit doubtful here. But yeah, it says king. I just bring my king up. Rook g2. It can even attack my g-pawn. Crazy thing is I can ignore it. Go king e5. He takes, and king d6. And even though black's up 2 pawns here, the strength and the power of my rook and the 2 connected pawns on the files are going to overwhelm black's pieces, even though black's up 2 pawns and has passers on a, b, and h7. But thing is, my pawns are so advanced that it's more than enough compensation. But I don't know, I just didn't want to lose a pawn, or 2 pawns for that matter. So that's why I played rook h2, which I thought made sense. Attack black's h-pawn and force him to go back and defend. So here he played rook c1 check. Now it's back to drawn. I go king g2. And I'm hitting the rook, and I'm hitting the pawn, so... But he actually finds this very crafty move, rook d3, and I actually have to be a bit careful here. I'm borderline losing if I don't find this only move to stay in the game. Like, black's threat right now is to play rook c2 check, and I will get ladder mated. Like, that is not easy to stop. At all. So, he was also... I first saw this, I'm like, wait, he's letting me take with check. But then I realized that if I take this with check, he goes king g8, and I have 2 threats. I have to save my rook, but also I have to worry about getting mated on the back rank, so... that would have been that's a very cunning move he did to make me find this only move to stay equal. Yeah, and the only move to stay equal here is rook f6, because you would meet rook c2 check with rook f2 to block. That wasn't there before. And you would defend your king like that. So that was the only move to stay in the game, and I find it at least. So after king g7, it's about equal again. I go rook h4. I'm trying to get out of the skewer because rook c2 would have won material if I wasn't careful. So here, yeah, the drawing move here is h6, but that looks kind of weird. Like, that's just a free pawn, but see, we're both scared about losing material, so that's like very human. So he didn't do that. He played rook on d to d1, which I thought was very logical. The engine doesn't like it. He's trying to play rook g1 and take on g5. There's not really a whole lot I can do about that. I can't really stop that, but the engine still says I'm better. If I play this, which would work, rook hf4. This would be borderline checkmate for black, because how does he stop rook f7, rook f8 things? But I'm like, okay, check here, rook takes g5, rook f7, king g8, rook takes b7. Like, the engine said to go something like this, and I'm slightly preferred here, but, you know, I didn't want to lose g5, so that's why I went rook d6 here, because at least I'm threatening a fork on d7. Rook d7 check would be pretty good for me. So he played rook g1 check, king f2, and again, the engine's saying to take on g5, but I suppose he was scared about rook d7 check, which is why he played rook c to f1 check, and again, the engine is saying I have a much better endgame. I'm +2 here. I think his idea was to try to force a draw by checking forever, because rook e1 check, I make pretty much no progress if I just go backwards or sideways. So I think he was sort of trying to force a draw or something like that. But I realize I can run up with my king. King d4. He plays check. King e5, and here I was not worried about losing the pawn, because I got my king to a very active spot, and I'm going to help escort my pawns up the board. That was my thought process. So after rook takes g5, what shocked me is that king e6 is the only good king move, and I would be +2.8. But I basically blitzed this out. After rook takes g5, I played the drawing move king f4. And I was shocked to see that this was drawn, because, A, I'm attacking your rook. I feel like that feels more natural than just going up and not threatening something of black's. And 2, like, you know, I'm attacking your rook, and rook d7 is still on the table. So I'm like, well, black has to deal with 2 things, whereas with king e6, he would only have to deal with 1 thing. So, but again, I should have brought my king closer upwards to probably support the pawns long term, but this move makes it drawn. So here, I blunder the advantage again. King f4 is drawing. He plays one of the best moves, rook d to g1. I play rook d7 check, and here black only has 1 king move to not be losing. He finds it. He plays king f6, and I thought at first that this was kind of wrong, because if you look carefully, black's almost checkmated. E5 would almost be checkmate, except the rook can take. And, yeah, it just looked like a bit of a precarious place to put your king. And actually, I was calculating here, e5 check, forcing the rook takes e5, and I thought maybe I could win his rook here. Rook d6 check, he goes king e7, I take, and unfortunately for me, this is why I didn't play e5, he has a stupid check on g5 or e1. We're going to pick e1 for this video, and, well, I am forced away from my rook, and he just collects the material back, and here it's black's up 2 pawns, but I'm going to take on h7, but I still have to be a bit careful because I'm still down a pawn. So I did not want to go down this route. He's very lucky that e5 was not possible. So here I'm like, let's take on h7, maybe we'll threaten a checkmate here if he's not careful. So here, after rook h takes h7, he played rook 5 to g4 check, king f3. This is totally drawn because the rooks are just going to harass my king forever. King f2. He could check again if he wanted to, I presume. But he instead goes rook a3 to try to maybe create some counterplay by taking on a2. Again, it's totally drawn here. So I think for a bit I played rook d6 check, king e5, rook e6 check, king d4. His king slipped out, so his king is not actually getting checkmated or like claustrophobic. So here I play rook takes b7. There's a ton of moves here that you can play, but it's drawn in either case. I could push to d6 if I wanted to. Yeah, basically all moves are drawn for white. none that like are stupid. So rook takes b7. He plays rook f4 check, and here I realized that I can't really move my king right to the left, because if I did that, then rook e3 check would be really bad for me. So king g2, and I thought maybe Dylan would have played rook takes a2, and I was kind of hoping he'd play rook takes a2, because I would play king g3 and get out of the perpetual checks, and maybe force a win or something. But he didn't do that. He just played rook g4 check, and I'm like, I don't. Did he force me into a draw, like a loop? Because if I go king f2, we've already been in that position. Going backwards makes no sense, because rook f3 would still be possible. Going to h2, I guess, is possible also. And king h1 would hang rook h3 mate. So I pretty much have to go back. And then he played check, king g2. And then here, I think he offered me a draw. In which case I said yes, because, he's just going to check back and forth, back and forth. So we get a draw. We get 3 draws in a row. That's kind of funny. And if we take a look at the accuracy, I had 86.8 and Dylan had 87.7. So again, I said in round 3 that I should work on my endgames, because I threw a winning endgame against Ruben, and I could have won against Dylan. But I made some fundamental endgame errors, which threw away my advantage several times this tournament. Like in this rook endgame, I could have had the advantage like a few times, and I didn't find the way to convert it. So that wasn't ideal. So I just need to work on endgame conversions. But overall, happy with my performance in the tournament. We get 2.5 out of 5. I gained about 9 rating points. I'll put the link of the ratings in the description. But overall, happy tournament. Just need to work on my endgames a bit more. And hope you guys liked this video, and let me know what you thought. And have a great rest of your day or night. Bye.